All right. Hello and welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining the Munro Live podcast. Today, I'm going to be your host. I'm Scott Hoffman. And with me today, I have the pleasure of introducing Dr. Peter Dow, VP of Engineering at REE Automotive. Dr. Dow, thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome. Appreciate you coming on.
That's good. Pleased to be here. Looking forward to our chat.
Excellent. Absolutely. Us as well. I know it's been fun. We kind of have continued to encounter different members of the REE team at various trade shows. I know we saw some of the folks I think we talked to Kim Mathers at CES, David Black at Work Truck Week, and we've seen the product kind of continuing to evolve and learn a little bit more. So for sure, we're excited to have you on today to learn a little bit more about the company, the product, and then obviously you and the role that you've played and continue to play in bringing this to life. So maybe kind of first off to get things rolling for the uninitiated or folks who might not be familiar with the company or what you guys do, maybe you could just summarize who is REE Automotive, what kind of products do you offer, and then what's your role at the company?
So to start with, REE is a technology company that's looking to really change the way that we engineer electric vehicles. Mm-hmm. So we've got a very novel solution, which is to take all of the propulsion, the braking, and the steering systems and encompass that within the wheel system itself. So everything is localized to the wheel and the wheel arch. And that is then a common unit that is used across all four corners of the vehicle. Mm-hmm. Coming with that, you get all of the by-wire systems. So when we talk about the drive and the brakes and the steering, they're all by-wire. There's no physical connection between the driver and our corner of the wheels. It's all electronic. So that brings with it a host of benefits, which hopefully we can talk about.
Yeah.
My role in this is that I've been now with REE for just over 2 years. Mm-hmm. I was brought in to put together the UK team. So I'm based in Coventry in the UK.
Okay.
We've got a team of about 150 people now in the UK, which are focused on taking our product to production. So this team in the UK is very much the engineering and the development team that are going to put that core product, our platforms, our first vehicles into production.
Okay.
My background is I've been working in automotive for over 25 years. I started off with the Ford Motor Company. I actually did a PhD with them on bizarrely on kind of fuel injection and the old gasoline engines.
It's come full circle.
I've worked in a variety of kind of OEMs and tier ones and consultancies over the last 25 years.
Yeah.
Primarily in kind of technology introduction. You know, my job is to bring new ideas to the market and to build teams that can actually then deliver that technology.
Yeah.
And this is the pinnacle of it. This is the most exciting part of my career so far.
Yeah, no, and I'm glad you mentioned that too, because in just doing a little research, it was fascinating to see. You know, you mentioned sort of your journey and the different OEMs that you've been with and suppliers and consultancies. You know, I was looking too just where some of those are based. You've had a lot of different cultural experiences with that as well, right? German suppliers and Indian OEMs, and I think it was Chinese, British. You've kind of spanned the full gambit here. Curious, I don't think were any of those. Is this your first startup, technically?
Bizarrely, I started 25 years ago with a company called Teardown, which was a very small startup based out of Cambridge University, and we did a lot of control electronics for Ford Motor Company.
Okay.
So that was my first startup, but they didn't call them startups back then.
Okay.
They were just,
what was the term back then?
Yeah, it wasn't. They were just small businesses that just started out. But this is my first venture into a full-blown kind of startup. But I think we talk about this a lot when we look at the technology and we look at the people we're employing. Mm-hmm. It's the startup thing is a label. What you're actually looking for is kind of innovators. You're looking for people that want to put a product out there that's different, that will challenge the norm. And so I'm not a great believer in the startup name. I'm just a great believer in saying we're a technology firm that are going to put good products out there.
I like it. Avoiding the labels. Solid. Makes sense. And thank you for the context there. No, it's neat to see, Yeah, well, and I guess again, the whole full circle thing started with a smaller company that was doing some innovative things and did some of that more in some mature and established places, and have now come back to where you're on the front lines with a bit of a smaller firm that's obviously got ambitious growth goals. Very exciting.
And I think you mentioned my global footprints, and I've
Yeah.
worked in Germany, I've worked quite a bit in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
I spent actually 5 years living in China and working in China.
Okay.
And you take an element of everything you go through
I'm
when you
sure.
work with this. And um, I've tried to bring along some of that, and I often talk again about this in a startup. Let's call it a startup in a global business, which REE is. We're US, we're UK, we're Israel. It's all about listening. It's all about listening to the talent you have around you, and it's all about kind of gathering in all of those ideas. And that's something we're really keen on. Is there's no fixed idea. There's no fixed way of doing it. If you were to kind of think about what we've got as a product, you can see we've come from a really blank sheet of paper and said, let's think about this differently. Let's think
Yeah.
about how you solve the mobility solution. And we try and take that all the way through our business, not just from engineering, but also in purchasing and in kind of every other aspect we do.
Sure. No, fantastic. And it's been interesting too, like, and I don't know, and I know some of this predates when you were involved with the company, but it was just fascinating even to hear how the company evolved to get to where it's currently at. I think always like in the mobility space, but it sounded like it was like even like wheelchairs and bike suspension systems, and that kind of has morphed over time to become what it is today.
Yeah.
That to me was fascinating, and I think so. You're in Coventry, right? I think
Yes,
that
that's
was
right.
like that has some ties to like the birthplace of bicycles, right? So there's maybe some parallels there.
Absolutely. We've got a statue in the center of Coventry for the guy that invented the bicycle.
Yeah,
So yeah,
yeah.
that's about
So
it.
maybe it was meant to be. Was that something like intentional that the team sought out that to tie back to the REE
I
heritage?
think I think actually when we looked at where we wanted to build the kind of engineering the engineering team, we did look at a lot of different options, but the kind of the Midlands in the UK, the Coventry area, has got so much history, as you just mentioned,
Hmm.
not just in bicycles, but automotive and
Yeah, just
aerospace and
mobility in general. Didn't
mobility.
the first like
And
sort of the British motor industry started in Coventry, right? With
exactly, and with that you get not just the engineers. So we've got a very strong pool of engineers, a very strong talent pool that we could pick from. But you've also got suppliers that can work with you. You've also got engineering services you can work with. You've also got test centers that are nearby that are attuned to what you need.
sure.
You know, and there is a bit of a can-do attitude. So that's been one of the things that's been key to where we're located in the UK.
Yeah, very neat. And so then this, I guess you've lived in a ton of different places, obviously, spent time all over the world. How does your current location compare?
Oh, wow, that's the. I think what we've got at the moment is this is the most focused I've been in my career
Sure.
in terms of we've got a team, and one of the key messages from REE is that we're trying to be very focused on delivering the product we've got, and we can talk a bit more about that.
Sure.
But as a business, we are very focused, and it's the first time I've been in a business where you've got all the elements of the business focused. Your manufacturing, your engineering, your
Hmm.
purchasing, your finance, everybody's together focused on what we want to do.
Hmm.
In other businesses I've been, you become very kind of distributed, and you get silos and you get lots of different kind of politics within that.
Sure.
We've been very dead. So I think geography isn't the thing. I think that the culture that we've brought in and that they've brought with us of being focused and being innovative is what I'm really enjoying.
Yeah. Excellent. 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 So I know one thing that's jumped out to us that's been really fascinating, and maybe this is a byproduct of some of what you're noting, the culture and moving quickly and iterating and optimizing. But I know when we initially saw the REEcorner concept, I think it was at CES, there was a version of it there. And not too much later, when we saw it at Work Truck Week, there was a completely sort of new and optimized version of it, right? And it was fascinating to see. I think that's something more recently in the automotive space that we've seen is sort of this challenging of the normal development cycle and how quickly things iterate, and really moving more towards like And it's interesting when you introduce the company and calling it like a technology company and focusing on some of the software. I think a lot of companies are trying or either trying to or being forced to sort of rectify that transition to where, you know, conventional automotive development cycles or product development cycles, years and years, that just doesn't fly as much anymore. So it's obvious you guys are moving quickly. I'd imagine as VP of engineering, you're probably leading the team that's making those optimization efforts take place. Like, I was curious, maybe you could tell us from like that initial version we saw to the new one, like how that optimization process works within your team, and has it reached its final form, or are we still on an iterative path here as we head to production?
This is a really good question. So you're right. We started off with what we call our B sample, which is what you first saw, which was the first corner that we engineered in the UK, and that was done to be very fast to get a product together. And conventionally, you would design something, you would then do some analysis, you might then refine it, you then build it, you then test it, and then once you've got the test results, you go into the next phase. And we realized to get our product to market, we can't follow that sequential kind of timeline. We've got to run a few things in parallel. So what we started to do was say, right, okay, once we've got the first design done, before we've even done any testing, let's test it in the virtual world. Let's get it into simulation, into software, and understand. We know, working with some of our partners, what sort of loads that vehicle's going to experience, what sort of environment that vehicle's going to be in. And we can, from the virtual world, we can then look at how we optimize it. And we actually then ran a load of virtual kind of road tests, evaluations, FE on it, to understand where it would be. So we could do that in parallel while we're also then testing the sample that we've built as well. Then we correlate back. So we say, actually, and we don't need to be exact. We just need to understand that our deltas, if you like, our changes from one to the other are close enough. So it's running with things in parallel, having managed risk, because there is always a risk, something, but it's a managed risk, and then making sure that you optimize as much as possible in the virtual world before you build something. And then once you build it, feed it back.
No, and it's fascinating to hear. I think something that we've heard with clients that we work with recently is that, you know, the correlation between the CAE, the FEA, the simulation, obviously there's going to be some correlation, and ideally it's really tight, but it's been fascinating to see. I think when people talk about Tesla specifically, there's some things they'll point out, like, man, I don't know how they ever arrived at that solution. And we've heard things that, like, people say, well, you know, there is correlation between the simulation and the physical, but sometimes you just have to build it and see how it happens, you know, see how it reacts, and then sort of iterate from there. So cool to hear that you guys are sort of in parallel paths, doing the simulation, but also getting some physical product out there. I know, you know, when we looked at the first version of the product, obviously you guys have refined it, but even that first version, I mean, it wasn't all, you know, brake bent steel, welded together, kind of stick built. It was still featuring cast aluminum nodes, and it still had, like, it looked like forged aluminum links. So, you know, ostensibly it could have been a production intent thing, but it's neat to see it then come a step further. So yeah, just fascinating to see how that's continuing to evolve.
And we also, we've got a number of key kind of performance requirements we want from our corners and also our platforms. And if you think, let's talk about this slightly. We call our P7 corner, which is the corner we're talking about, is a corner that can do from class 3 to class 5 products. So it's got a range of applications.
For sure.
So you have to look at the worst case scenario on that, and you engineer for the worst case, and then you consider that you're going to carry some over engineering into the lower classes, right? But you need to optimize that. Within all of that, there's also then, you know, there's weight characteristics, there's then durability characteristics, there's lots of things that we need to engineer into that to make sure we're going through. So when we did the B sample, we wrote down those requirements and we engineered as close as we could to it. And one of the lessons is not just to stick with your requirements that you wrote right at the start, is to go back and revisit them and understand whether you've got your requirements right, whether you've actually you've spec'd your targets correctly. And actually, we've set ourselves harder targets then for things like weight and things like later. So what you're seeing with what we call the C sample, which is the new one you've talked about, which is the production corner, is things where we've taken like 20%, 25% weight out of the corner, because that was one of the things we felt wasn't good enough.
Yeah.
And we wanted to go forward. So it's constantly evolving. It's constantly looking for improvements is what we're trying to do.
Yeah. And I know, I think it was David that we spoke to at one of the shows, but I think he noted like something like 40 or 50 pounds came out of each corner, which, I mean, for the uninitiated, that's like a massive amount of weight to take out in any vehicle. And to get it, at the corners like that, like I wouldn't at first blush have assumed there was that much weight to give. So kudos to the team for continuing to have that aggressive mentality there. And I think, the willingness to push back on requirements too, that's something that we're seeing, that those who are trying to be competitive are needing to embrace that mentality, right? Because I think, if I'm just transparent about like clients that come to us, if they're more established, I think that they can kind of use requirements as a barrier, a reason not to do things potentially. But we're seeing as new folks are coming into the space and being willing to push on some of these, they either need to fall in line or they're going to potentially get left behind as far as some of that's concerned. So neat to hear that a healthy appetite for revisiting requirements to see if they need to be increased or maybe reeled back or just balanced. I think not treating them like they're set in stone is probably a big advantage for the REE team.
And I think the most important requirement is, what does your customer want?
For
and
sure.
I think that's the thing where when you look at people like Tesla, they've taken that right from the start. And we always ask ourselves, what does the customer want from this?
Sure.
And it may be that engineers can always put in a list of requirements, but actually they don't link back to what the customer really wants.
Sure.
They're very good at that. So you have to keep challenging yourself on that.
Yeah. That's one of our favorite things, I think, in like workshops or design efforts with folks, when you get that like requirement and you ask, well, what is this requirement? What is it based on? And it's like you play this game of 20 questions to try and get back to the genesis of where it even came from. And sometimes you find that it's some like ridiculous, unique scenario that happened 50 years ago. And it's like, okay, maybe it's time to reevaluate this. Well, and that's one of the advantages, not having the burden of a bunch of legacy baggage and requirements too, but fascinating.
Yeah.
So you mentioned customer requirements, and I think this is one of the areas I'm super interested in is, so say, and I think on the site or in various materials, we've seen some of the advantages spoken to. And actually, well, let's tee that up, right? So for anyone who hasn't heard about this, the advantages of the REEcorner system. If I'm a prospective client, I have commercial vehicles, and I'm hear about you guys, I'm interested. What's the pitch? Like, what's the advantages that brings to them? And ultimately, I'm curious about asking about how they go about implementing it and what roles are played. But at a high level, maybe the advantages of the corner system, if you were to sort of summarize at a high level.
Yeah, so let's go through this. So we've got the REEcorner system is the foundation of what we do, and that, like I said, that gives you a lot of all of the by-wire systems. So there's a number of things that come with that. You've got a flexibility of platform, in that you can look at the dimensions of your platform, be it the wheelbase or the track of the vehicle. You're not fixed by investment against a fixed dimension of your platform. You can look at different wheelbases. You get a lot of performance benefits from the by-wire system. We can talk quite a bit about this because it brings you essentially 4 independent drive units. So we can bring things like torque vector in, we can bring regenerative braking on all 4 wheels. We've got 4-wheel steer, in terms of each unit can steer up to 32 degrees. So you've got
big deal for turning circle, turning radiuses. Yeah, that's huge.
In urban environments, you can make the vehicle kind of go into spaces it probably shouldn't normally go into.
Sure.
And be quite maneuverable. And that then also comes with a safety element. So when we talk about this, there's the amount of kind of software overchecks and redundancy we've got in our system, and mechanical redundancy. It allows then to kind of step up the safety level. So we've got the ability in any environment to use the brakes and the steering and the traction to make sure that you keep that vehicle in a straight line, in a safe straight line, and kind of deliver in any kind of fault environment or any crash environment. You've still got a lot of elements that you can use to control the vehicle. We talk about it fail operational. So anything into the vehicle, it's operational. So that gives you all of that. It also then allows you to kind of package everything that you need to build an electric vehicle within a platform on a very flat environment. We've got everything but below the kind of in the floor. So you've got all of your high voltage systems, your cooling systems, your low voltage systems on a flat floor.
Yeah.
Which then allows you to have a whole flexibility about your top hats, as we call it, the body system you put on top of it. So you can have different configurations off of one platform. So they could be a box van, it could be a walk-in van, it could be a camper van, it could be lots of different variants that you put on top of the platform because of the flexibility it gives you. We're all about modularity. We're all about saying, take our corners, use them in that flexible manner, and allows you then to deliver a vehicle that is more bespoke for what the customer needs are than a generic vehicle that you then have to adapt to do what you want it to do.
Sure. No, it's fantastic. I think definitely my mind jumps to thinking about some of the hurdles that, when you think about like redundancy of some of the mechanisms that control a vehicle, and, what happens if something fails when you've got 4 independent setups that all can brake and all can steer and all can drive. That's a fair amount of redundancy just at base level, right? And then I imagine there's probably redundant power and additional redundant controls that you guys have. But yeah, it's a fascinating departure from some of, I think, the conventional way that we see clients think about, covering their bases from a safety perspective. I think your system, if it's all-wheel drive equipped especially, has a lot more levers to potentially pull. And it's fascinating to think. I know it said that the system is autonomous or capable of autonomy or autonomous capable. I was curious, from the REE perspective, does REE intend to take on the sort of onerous task of developing the autonomous control system with the sensors and everything that's going to feed it, or just basically saying, hey, you can feed us inputs and we can make it drive and do whatever you need to do?
Exactly what you just said. So if you think we've got a system that is it's driver agnostic, is the term we use. So it could be a human or it could be a computer.
Sure.
Because essentially the same inputs into our system are a torque demand, a steering or yaw demand that the platform takes. And when you look at autonomous applications, there's 3 elements to it. There's the vision or the perception of where I am. So all of the cameras, the lidars, and the sensors. There's the intelligence to say what to do, when to do.
Yeah.
And then there's there's the robotic bit, the driving bit. Sure. And that's the bit that we can provide. Yep. And that's the bit we can provide with no additional effort, because the redundancy is there, the safety is there. Mm-hmm. So essentially that allows people then just to come along with their autonomous system kind of packs, if you like, and plug it into our platform, and it's ready to go.
That's awesome, and that was my assumption prior to this conversation, and I was hoping, because we've seen this, right, where like initially I think every OEM said, hey, we're going to design our own fully autonomous capabilities, this stack, and it's just like you're seeing all these folks kind of back off of that and rely on the Mobilize and the folks like that. There are companies that have really, they've just gotten way more reps and miles and all this stuff and are designing kind of modular systems for that aspect of it that would pair nicely with something like you're mentioning here. So I think focusing on where in your wheelhouse is probably the smartest thing to do there, especially, when resources are constrained. So
we've got a phrase that we use, which is the powered by REE.
Okay.
So what we see is that we can provide corners and platforms that allow people to deliver whatever vehicle they feel is appropriate for their customers. And whether you put a top hat that has a driver on it, whether you put a body on it that is a shuttle that is autonomous, mm-hmm. everything underneath that is powered by REE, and it's almost a second label on the vehicle. We're not looking to have our label on the front of it to say this is a REE vehicle. We're looking to enable people to build their own vehicles, and it's a kit that they can go with then and say, actually, I want this wheelbase, I want this width, I want this kind of performance. Put it together, and then they can put their different systems on top of it as flexibly as they like.
Yeah. No, it's something it's funny because my next question is here. In principle, that all sounds like a no-brainer and it sounds really easy, but I guess I'm very curious too to understand. So help me understand, if I'm someone and I'm like, hey, I'm really interested in this powered by REE system. I want this on my vehicle. Now what do I do? REE, hey, I want this in my vehicle. What are the next steps? And I guess like the integration to a platform or who's responsible for what, I guess maybe walk me through. Because, right, there's going to be the rest of the architecture, other high voltage monuments and thermal systems, and a lot of things have to work together in tandem. So how does that sort of handoff work between someone deciding they want to use a REE platform and then tailoring it to their application?
Well, I think there's lots of different options, but if we talk about three, let's talk about three different options. The first option is we can provide you with corners and all of our control system that goes with it. We have what we call a driver module, which is if you like, the driver steering wheel with what we call the hand loader that gives you feedback, the pedals, our REE controller, and the corners. And they can then integrate that into their chassis. We can work with them in terms of all of the load cases and everything that goes with the integration of our corners. We've got manuals that can support that, and then they build up their cooling system, their high voltage
their battery,
system,
their charging infrastructure, all that stuff.
So that's one option.
Okay.
The second option is that, and we've developed this more because we realize that is quite a challenge for some customers, is actually we can provide you with a platform, a strip chassis as we call it, which is then all the mechanical chassis, it's all the high voltage system, the cooling system, the low voltage system, all ready for somebody to put a body on. Okay, and they can decide what to do, and we can then work with them. We've got all of the interface points defined, all of the electrical software and thermal kind of interfaces defined, so that you can then define what you want on top of our platform. But we provide you with a platform, and we'd have a conversation about what the wheelbase you want and whatever requirements that vehicle is. But we can engineer that for you. And then the third option is we've got our cab chassis versions, which is then actually we've got a version that we're bringing out at the end of this year. We'll have on the roads in the US at the end of this year, which is a cab variant. So we've then got a driver cab on top of our strip chassis, with all the driver controls, all the interfaces to the driver, the seats, etc. Standard cab chassis, and it allows then people to put a different box on the back or whatever they feel they want to put on the back of it. So you've got a number of different options that you can take.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. And yeah, and then the last variant there, that's not atypical of existing commercial vans, whether it be a Transit or a Sprinter or an express van, whatever the case. So having it with just the cab and then allowing a box builder to make it into an ambulance or a shuttle bus or something. Sweet camper van, something like that. But cool. Okay, so a lot of different options there. And it sounds like the third of those options is the one that we will see on the road first, it sounds like. Is that correct? Okay.
Yeah, so I've got, as I speak, we've got we're building the first kind of variants of that here in the UK, in terms of the strip chassis. We've got all of our kind of testing for the by-wire system underway. We're starting our homologation testing on that in the next month or so.
Yeah.
So yeah, we've got that. So we've got that very much planned, and that will give you a cab chassis. People that have seen our kind of show stand at ACT this year, we gave a demonstration of what that looks like. But we've got a driver, passenger seats, cab with a lot of benefits. So you'll see that because of the flexibility of the corners, you've got a very low step-in height. You only got 2 steps to get into the vehicle. You've got fantastic vision because you can sit the driver on top or in front of the wheel, so he or she has an amazing vision, which again brings safety because we can put that steering wheel where we want. And it then gives you a lot of space within the cab without compromising any of your cargo space at the back.
Sure.
Actually optimizing the cargo space at the back.
Yeah, and that's one that, like, unless someone's climbed up into some of these alternative products that exist and sat like in a cab over or set up and seen like you have to climb way up into the sky to get into it and look at some of the downward angles and how weird they are, like that's one of the things, maybe sort of the driver-centric visibility and accessibility that really jumped out to me when I saw folks like getting in and out of some of the versions of it. It's like, that is massively different, and something that I guess unless it's someone who's spent time in some of those products, they probably don't fully appreciate it just seeing it on YouTube or something. But that that really compact Z sort of height of the system does open up a lot of flexibility there that I'm sure will be a big draw for the system in general.
Yeah, and maybe let's talk about, so the whole kind of EV commercial truck kind of offering we've got. What we want to bring with it is actually it's a product that is great to drive as well.
Yeah.
So we talked earlier when we've got the corners that it gives you that performance benefit. Part of my team, you know, the team that work on vehicle dynamics and kind of the performance of the vehicle, they're all telling me this drives like an SUV. This doesn't drive like a truck. We've got a seating position that kind of is more like an SUV. Because of the by-wire system, you can tune that vehicle to drive as you want.
To steer and feel and give feedback, you know, however you want, essentially.
Yeah. Your center of gravity is very low. You know, you've got
big old battery down there. Yeah.
But that allows, I think it opens up the market for people that want to use commercial trucks to maybe a whole host of new drivers that can actually drive these trucks, because they're easy to drive and actually they're quite fun to drive.
Yeah.
My test team come back with a smile on their face every day. I've been out of them.
That's awesome. Yeah, I've always had like a soft spot for like buses and vans, and I had like an old VW bus that I converted, like put a diesel engine in it that didn't belong in it, and it was fun to drive. But it was like, I remember the steering wheel was huge and it was like really flat because you kind of had to lay over it and really horse it. And I didn't bother to hook up power steering when I did the engine swap, so I shot myself in the foot there. But yeah, I mean, larger vehicles with especially some of the, in that case, I was sitting in front of the wheels. But yeah, I mean, there's an element to where to drive some of these vehicles, there's like a physical size and strength limitation even potentially. And it sounds like that is sort of ostensibly no longer a barrier here, which is pretty.
No longer a barrier. It opens up a lot more opportunities for people, but it is, and we can tune it as well. And that's when we talk about this vehicle being actually a software vehicle, because we can talk with customers as well, because you've got the by-wire system, you can look at making the vehicle do different things. So for example, if we find that the vehicle is loaded up, we can control the top speed. We can do that fixed with code directly into the vehicle, or we can use by-wire system, over the air to actually talk to the system. So we can bring in that element of safety or the use cases, and we're constantly taking data from the vehicle, so we know what it's doing, we know how it's being used.
Yeah.
And that again brings in the safety elements, people, how they use the trucks.
Well, and that's fascinating too. I guess that never really occurred to me, but I guess conventionally, like thinking just about steering, I guess if you know how fast you're going and how much you're loaded up, I guess maybe you're saying, hey, if someone yanks the wheel and tries to jackknife this thing at speed, we know that that's not a good idea. Now you can put bookends around it and keep it within a safe boundary. That's really something that I'm fascinated. Like the whole, we're seeing steer-by-wire has been talked about for years, and now like I think Lexus on the RZ450 might be the first to actually get it into production. Obvious advantages there in terms of cost and weight savings and taking away some of the mechanical linkages, and obvious advantages in terms of being able to tune it, not having to go hand over hand, having variable ratios, things like that. But what was impressive to me is like, how is it that REE is like beating a bunch of conventional players to the space with this? I think it's fascinating that, and kudos to the team for being basically on the forefront of by-wire systems. We're seeing other folks do one or the other of these, and there's some vehicles we've seen that are in development that have brake-by-wire systems that are coming to market, but you've got the steer-by-wire and you've got the brake-by-wire both coming at the same time. I mean, what was that? I guess, was that always like from the start part of the REE vision, or how early was that decision made? And because there's regulatory aspects that are sort of out of your control, right? In terms of bringing that out.
Yes and no. So I think to have all three systems in the vehicle from day one was always the plan. Or in the corner was always the plan.
Yeah.
And because we're controlling the software, and I think we talk about that we're doing this very quickly, but all the work we've been doing over the last couple of years has been based on a very, very sound foundation of all the work that REE has been doing prior to that. You know, so we've not just started 2 years ago. There's been a lot of work been done prior to that on
they didn't do any work until you arrived, right? And that's when the magic started happening.
Yeah. So so there's a lot of stuff there, and I think we've got control of the software. We are developing it ourselves. We've got a very rigid test regime that we're going through with it, and we're working with some fairly strong or established kind of partners with that. So, for example, American Axle is our partner for our drive system. So we're working with them on their experience, and we're bringing that in. Brembo is our brake partner.
Yep.
So we're working with them on that, and we've pulled a lot of kind of knowledge together on that from our suppliers, but also from our internal teams. But then it's going back to what I said at the start. It's being focused and actually saying the first thing we do is we deliver the by-wire system that is reliable and safe, and then we can bring in the features that we just talked about. But if you're focused, and you focus on, first of all, safety and performance, base performance and reliability, you get those three right, then you can bring in the fancy bits later.
Sure.
A lot of people get caught up in all the different scenarios you want to do with this. We've just talked about it. You can do it with weight sensing. You can do with the different kind of tuning on the rates of the steering wheel. Yeah, you can do all of that once you've got a solid foundation.
Yeah.
And that's what we've been really laser focused on, is getting that solid foundation in place.
Yeah.
Because that then allows you to do the bits.
Well, and that's something that too, like I almost just like trying to wrap my head around, like it would seem as though like there's a lot of neat elements of the system, but really, I mean, the magic is taking these 4 independently capable systems and having them all work in harmony. Like the brains and the software of the system, I think are probably, and mechanical's my background, so I always lean towards the mechanical stuff, but it seems like the software is probably really where, from an effort perspective, a ton of that has to be focused there, right? To bring this to being.
Absolutely. I mean, let's be really clear. When we look at our corner, we've got two parts to our corner, what we call the inboard and the outboard. Yep. And the outboard part is pretty standard engineering. Yep. It's suspension arms, it's springs, it's dampers, it's brake calipers, it's wheels. Yeah. It's pretty standard. Nothing special there. When we look inboard, we've got a motor, we've got a steering actuator, we've got braking actuators, and all of that. The components exist.
Yeah, they're pretty industrially hardened. Like you're working with established suppliers. Yeah.
But then, as you just talked about, the brains is in the software then, and actually it's then in this. Each corner has its own ECU, which is our own kind of control unit, with our own software in it, and then we've also got our REE center, which is the one that then coordinates between all 4 corners to control it. That's the magic juice. That's the bit that makes it all work. Yeah. And that's the bit that we've really kind of been putting the time on.
Sure.
And there's been a lot of work done.
Yeah, I can imagine. Oh, it's fascinating. And like I said, I mean, as far as the mechanical design, it's neat to see, and I think smart, right, to leverage the strengths of some of the existing well-established players versus trying to come up with your own motors or bespoke solution to the extent that it makes sense. When people think of performance brake applications, Brembo's a name that pops to mind. It's pretty neat to see a fixed caliper Brembo setup on this application. It doesn't seem like an area you're skimping at all. Now, just talking about some of the physical components, I guess, and design choices there, I was kind of geeking out over the different elements and kind of walking through it. It looks like, so obviously very aluminum intensive, primarily looks like castings, maybe some forgings in there. But again, I would imagine more typically in a commercial segment, you'd see more like kind of steel weldments, right, and a lot of stampings. Was the decision to go to aluminum primarily based on weight optimization or integration of a lot of different features into one, or what was it was surprisingly aluminum intensive, I guess I would say, when I first looked at it. What was sort of the driver there?
So I think we are aluminum intensive within the corner. Actually, when we go into our platforms and into our chassis, we are actually mild steel and high strength steels. But yeah, so we've got a lot of castings in there, and we want to optimize the weight. I think that's a really key element that we talked about. We want to when we looked at the whole corner as well, with the analysis we did, we wanted to with the castings to get the right shapes and get the footprint of the corner to be as small as possible. Because what we don't want is to go with this corner technology. You end up with a corner that is actually intrusive into the rest of the vehicle. And it then goes away with it.
Sure.
But so you've seen a lot of the castings have been done to optimize the space, and the whole package that we've put together. You know, there's not much spare space in there. The team that have done that have done a great job in terms of making sure we've got all the right clearances, but we've got as optimum package as possible. And the material selection and the kind of the processes we've chosen have allowed us to do that at the volumes we're looking at to do with. So it's the initial kind of you could say low volumes, but the kind of hundreds and early thousands allows us to do that. We would look probably at some different methods if we go to a higher volume.
Sure.
But as the starting point to get us there, this is the optimum process.
Yeah. No, excellent. And like I said, it's apparent, obviously, like I said, when we looked at the first version of it, there was clearly some optimization that had happened. The castings allowed sort of like a really shrink wrap design, and you saw sort of structure only where it was needed, or we thought we saw that, and then we saw that structure shrink even further. So neat to see that continue.
There's another key element to talk about that we evolved the corner from B to C, is that when we first used the B corner, one of the key elements I haven't talked about is that corner can be swapped very quickly.
Yeah, let's chat about that.
Yeah, so the corner can be removed from the vehicle and replaced in less than 1 hour. That's one of our key.
Crazy. I mean, really quite crazy. There's almost nothing that you can do in an hour on a vehicle. I feel like you can't change a alternator in an hour.
Yeah. So we talk about changing the whole electric powertrain, which is what you would do if you changed all 4 corners in 4 hours.
Yeah.
And my workshop team in the UK have got a challenge. I think they're down to about 25 minutes at the moment. So
wow.
1 hour is our target, but we've got some Formula One teams in the UK that are swapping that corner really quickly.
That's awesome.
So, but when we looked at how we did that with the first generation, we then evolved it and actually worked out that going back to what does our customer need. Customers are going to have jacks. They're not going to have vehicle lifts. How are they going to do this? So we've optimized the corner so it only has horizontal fixings now. There's no vertical fixings.
So just one axis. Yep.
One axis to kind of deck the corner in. It also has an automatic connection now, so that when you deck the corner, all of the high voltage and low voltage systems are automatically engaged. There's no hands in there. There's no safety issues with getting.
Yeah, which is crazy to think. So it's just like a bulkhead essentially that has your cooling, and then your high voltage connections go in all together.
So as you deck the corner, they just automatically connect up, and you're connected. Okay. Dry break on the coolant, so you're not having to drain the system or reconnect the system again.
Oh wow, okay, yeah, well, that's phenomenal. And that was a question I was curious about. So like, if someone opts to use this platform, say that they buy the cab equipped version, the third option that you had talked about later this year, they get one, awesome, love this thing, driving it around. Would if they came to a scenario where a corner needed to be replaced, is it a situation where REE could sell them the corner and they have it on their shelf in their facility and they're doing that, or does it need to go to like a special REE technician or center to do this?
Oh, we talk about the corner being one part number, so it's a part, and the idea is that you would have a spare corner stock, and if the corner for whatever reason, be an accident or whatever, needs to be replaced, we've got a process, we've got the tools that you need to kind of hold the corner. The customer can do that themselves.
Okay,
it's a very simple process.
Got it. And then there's the mechanical removal and install, and then there's like a calibration process, obviously, that has to happen to sort of home and center everything, I'd imagine.
Yes. So we align everything and everything that goes with that. But And one of the things that we can talk about now is that, I mean, there's a fuzzy picture behind me, but it's actually our production line here in the UK.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. So when we're actually manufacturing these corners, every corner is recorded, and we know where every corner is. So actually, there's the opportunity to reuse corners as well. So if a customer, for example, has a corner that's come off one vehicle, and it's maybe had a small repair on it, it can go onto a second vehicle, and we then keep corner IDs. So it's not you're not got four corners for life on a vehicle.
Sure.
You've actually got the opportunity to continue the life of that vehicle by upgrading the corners, maybe even upgrading the body. But you've got the ability to get more usage out of your vehicle than just the lifetime of the powertrain.
And that actually is a fascinating aspect that I hadn't even really considered. Yeah, you know, you think about, you know, people aren't taking, if someone dings up one of their units or something in the field, like they're not swapping the engine out for the sake of saving cost. But if it was as simple as unbolting something in an hour and putting it on a shelf, I mean, that makes all the sense in the world. And I guess that answers another question I had, which was almost like, as amazing as it is that a sub 1 hour install and removal time, I'm like thinking like, I'm looking at the components on here and thinking like, I don't really see many of these components like being high fail items, right? To think that you would need to be replacing these very frequently. So I guess I was curious, is there like a, barring physical damage from like an impact scenario, what is the forecasted sort of on road, or I don't, whether it's miles or hours, how long should one of these things last in theory, barring any extenuating circumstances?
So our corner's designed for a 10-year life, or I think we're 250,000 kilometers is the base is the base life of the corner. So you're right, and all of those elements are sealed. So there is no serviceable element in the corner other than your brake pads, your brake fluid, and your tires. And all of those can be serviced from the wheel arch without having to take the corner off. They're serviceable items. So you're right. There isn't anything in there that needs to be replaced or serviced. So you would look to kind of upgrade your vehicle, maybe take the corner off and get it upgraded with certain elements. But we're looking more for kind of accident or kind of crash environments where if you want to replace that corner, you're not taking the vehicle off the road for 2, 3, 4 days to get it repaired. You're taking it off the road maybe for 2 or 3 hours to change a corner and fix it up and get it back working again. Because we know these are tools. These vehicles are tools that our customers need to make money, and we need them on the road as much as possible.
Yeah, and fascinating there that so your ability, you know, I guess if if one gets damaged, you can get back on the road more quickly, swapping one in. But also, I guess if a vehicle got dinged pretty hard and crunched in a corner, you might lose that one corner, but you could take those 3 and put them into your crib essentially to support other vehicles that you have on the road and recover. Obviously, a lot of the costs associated with the system is in those corner units, and those could be retrievable, which is an interesting concept. Very neat.
No, exactly.
Okay. And I was interested too. I was thinking about other applications, like, you know, we've seen some of the obvious like box truck commercial applications, any vehicle that's roughly that shape or size. But I was curious about, in terms of other applications, I used to work at a company where we did like conveyance solutions for inside of plants and a lot of automotive and tractor building, stuff like that. And we did autonomous guided vehicles, AGVs, and they would go around and we were always working on trying to build this robust platform that could be flexible and serviceable. Serviceability in a plant environment is paramount, right? Because downtime of the line is just like highly scrutinized, losing money by the second. So I was curious, like, is there any world where these might make sense, like moving for like things that transport conveyance, like products along assembly lines or in warehousing? I'm curious, is there any thought of applications, maybe even off the road, but still doing work, but within other environments?
I tell you, I always say it's our benefit and our downfall is that we've got such a flexible option.
Sure.
That everybody comes along with all their great ideas, and I think there are lots of applications. We're looking at, like you say, commercial trucks. We're looking at on-road applications. We're looking at passenger shuttles, passenger buses. We've had a few people talk to us about things such as airport transportation. We mentioned camper vans. We've had lots and
I'll
lots
sign
of
up for one of the camper vans when that's
yeah.
time.
So we've had lots and lots of different applications come forward and work at what we can do with it. But you're right, there is things, and maybe one of the things I can talk about as well is that there is a flexibility with the corner to say, if we can get enough performance because the environment from just 2 motors, we can decontent 2 of the corners and actually take the motor out and make it cheaper. And actually then you can have a 2-wheel drive system because it's as flexible as not installing that motor.
Sure.
And so when we look at these applications, there's a world of opportunity for people to say, how can we use them? You've given us some good ideas there. We'll have to look into that.
No, excellent. Well, and I imagine that is like everyone can suggest stuff, but actually doing it and not letting that potential application distract you from the main goal, I think is probably
that's the really key point, is that like I keep saying, we've been really laser focused to say we want to put our P7 product on the market. We've got a cab chassis on the market. We want to prove our product out there by having something on the road so people can drive. Everybody we talk to goes, gee, that's great, brilliant, lovely idea. Can I drive it? Yeah. And so that's what we're looking to do. We'll have that product out there. We've got customers lined up. We're putting that out at the end of this year.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And I saw, so it looked like there was like a number of US-based sort of partners, those distributors that people would buy through or source them through. Looked like, what was there, like 5 or 6 companies or something like that? So probably getting coverage different areas.
To be fair, the business team seem to be kind of expanding it daily, so my numbers won't be right. But we've got a number of dealer networks that we're working with across the US, both regionally and nationally, that will be the point of contact for our trucks, and they will have the first of our products, and they will be kind of distributing them out. But keep looking at our website because the numbers keep going up.
Yeah. And I imagine it's interesting too that the US is the first market that they're debuting in. Obviously, selfishly, I'm sure you're looking forward to having them in the UK. How sort of quickly after the US launch are you guys forecasting, I guess, Europe initially or other areas? I guess, what is sort of the rollout plan?
Our rollout plan is very much focused on the US. So we're focused on US homologation this year, US product this year, and actually getting the product out there. We've then got plans to go not just to Europe and the UK, but also other regions such as Japan. They are following. We haven't got definite dates, but we are engineering a lot of the product to be applicable not just to the US but also to Europe. So when we put the requirements together, as we talked right at the start of this, is we don't just say this is just just a US requirement. We're actually incorporating the European requirements as well, so that we kind of put it together. But the US is the first to market. That's the focus for the next 6 months.
Got it. Yeah,
getting those trucks on the road.
Yeah, and I'd imagine, right, because I think across the nation we're seeing there's a lot of municipalities and a lot of industries where people have there's pressures, whether they be implicit or explicit, right, to lower their impact and to start getting greener in their fleets. And I think it's been fascinating to see how initially there's like sort of a vacuum in that space and not a whole lot of offerings. And so you've seen these companies, and there's companies that are buying rolling chassis from, ICE platforms, throwing away all the bits and putting in their own stuff with sort of off-the-shelf parts. And it's been fascinating to see people kind of attempt to fill this void, I guess, in the absence of a large presence from legacy OEMs. I think now we're starting to see more legacy OEMs, like everything, okay, we're kind of moving in this direction, they're starting to play. But what I think is really neat about the REE system is like there are some distinctly different, unique, advantageous elements of this that don't just make it seem like it's just another electrified roller. Like the whole modularity and the serviceability, the flatness of the package. There's definitely some things that are distinct about this that separate it from other Class X offerings, just in the space, which I think is obviously by design and unique, but it's refreshing. I think there's definitely some things about this that make it stand apart from any of the other Class 2 through 7 things that I've seen, at least. So
yeah, I go back to right at the start. We're trying to provide a mobility solution to our customers. We're not trying to provide a truck. So we're not. What you find at the moment is you kind of have a truck, and then you have to adapt things to it. How does my use case fit onto this? How does my kind of body fit onto this? We wanted to take this right from the start and say, we want to provide you with a solution. How are we going to solve your problem that you have? You want to get goods from A to B. You want to get people from A to B. And we believe we've got a really strong offering now with the REE corners and the REE platform that allows people to go with that.
Excellent. Yeah. And it looks like, so focus on the US here initially. And I think so are you guys in the process of standing up a plant in Texas, I believe, or is that already in motion, or where's that kind of at?
So that's coming up. So like I said, if you look behind me, we've got our what we call our integration center in the UK. This is where we're manufacturing our first corners. It's our pilot plant. So the idea is that we've got the engineers that sit right next to the manufacturing facility for the first time we put it through.
Which is awesome.
This will build 40,000 corners a year.
Wow.
So this is the capability here. We build 40,000 corners a year with 7 operators. It's a semi-robotic line.
Okay.
Wow. It's there. This is being blueprinted and then copied into Austin, Texas.
Okay.
Which then gives us another additional 40 more. I think actually more than 40,000 there. So first start here in the UK, based off of we've got the team here, we've got the engineering here. We get it right, we get it perfect here. Then we just copy and paste. First into Texas, second and third into whichever region we feel is the best for our customer base.
Got it. Awesome. Yeah, and Austin's like the hot place right now, so it's neat. You guys will be right in the hotbed of a lot of other interesting companies and things going on. I'm sure that was not by accident. Very cool. No, this has been super fascinating to learn more about this and to get to know you, Peter. I really appreciate the time today. I know it is a Friday and it is late in the day, and I think you may have some other obligations too that are knocking on the door. So I want to be respectful of your time and not take too long. But I guess while we're on here, any last kind of thoughts or things you want to share about the REE mission, or just things that if someone's tuning in that you think they ought to know about the product?
No, I think where I started is I've been around a long time. You can see I've got grey hair. I've been in automotive a long time. This is the most exciting project I've ever worked on because I feel we're solving a solution. We're solving what our customers want. We're solving a mobility kind of system that also helps the planet. We're bringing along the kind of the EV side of things. We've got a fantastic team. We've got a fantastic product, and look out for us on the roads at the end of this year.
Yeah. Oh, excellent. And I might go a step further to say they have a fantastic leader and visionary on the team here, Peter. It's really neat to see. You can't fake being excited about your product and your team and what you're doing, and it's been apparent through this whole conversation. This is the first time I've met you, and you seem pretty genuinely excited about this. So it's that definitely has come through, and thank you for sharing this with us and with the listeners to the channel. Sincerely appreciate it.
No, it's been great to chat.
All right. Well, hey, everyone. Thanks for tuning in, as always, to the Munro Live podcast. Huge thanks again to Dr. Dow for joining us, and hopefully you found today's episode interesting. Definitely check back in for more to come, but thanks so much, and have a great evening.